Hey, it's Doris with All of the Books, and I thought I should finish up my January reading wrap-ups before March gets here. So, in January I was reading with a Middle Eastern theme, and I have divided those out into those from a Jewish perspective and those from a Muslim perspective. And today I'm going to do the Jewish ones, and I will later today put on a different shirt. I don't know why I ironed for, and you know, I just want to share the joy of a good iron job. Yeah, so I will wrap up the Muslim perspective ones as well and post those later this week. So let's just jump in. And serendipitously, I didn't even plan this. I didn't know what I was doing when I started collecting these books over the course of the past year, but both sets of books have come out with a nice timeline in my perspective. So yeah, I just got a really good view through the years, and it's so neat that it just turned out that way because I didn't plan it. But anyway, Life, I put these in chronological order too, by the way. So Life in Year 1, this is 1 AD in Palestine, and this is a nonfiction, just kind of trying to look at the information out there, archaeological and whatnot, and just try to come up with a perspective of what life was like back then in Palestine from somewhat of a non-religious perspective. So this was okay. It was a very fast read because I mean, it's not that long, and I didn't read the footnotes because, you know, I just wasn't in the mood. But this talks about topics like the world, money, home, food, baths, health, respect, religion, war, and death. So, and like I said, this was interesting, and I learned a little bit, but you learn a lot from reading the Bible, and you know, here in the South we do grow up reading that quite a bit, a lot of us. And so I knew a lot of it, and also I had just read the next book I'm going to mention, which talks about a lot of it. So yeah, this was a good read, but nothing to write home about. This one, however, is excellent. This is one I would recommend to anyone. I did a full-length review, which I hardly ever do, and I will try to remember to link that below so you can watch it if you're more interested. But briefly, this is set around 70 or late 60s AD, the second fall of the temple and the Roman conquest of Jerusalem. This is the last stand with a couple of zealous Jewish groups at Masada, which is a high fortress basically, and it was great. I learned so much. It was so well researched. It's just brilliant. It's delivered from the perspective of 4 different women, and just gradually you learn how those women are related. And unlike a lot of books that come from different perspectives, this doesn't alternate chapters. So you get the first chunk of the book from one perspective, then it switches to the next perspective for a chunk. So the book is divided into 4 parts and then an epilogue. So highly recommend, and I will link my full-length review below if you are interested. But this was great, and I think most people would really enjoy it. This one was also fabulous, and I've also done a full-length review on this one as well. I felt like if I tried to talk about this in a wrap-up, my wrap-up would be, you know, 20+ minutes long, and I was just trying to speed up the process. This one, I am not sure if everyone would love it as much. It's a little bit weightier and more dense. This one is set in the 1660s. It starts just after the Inquisition in Portugal, the Portuguese Inquisition. So it is a monk that has been blinded in the Inquisition, and he is then, I mean, actually, say he gets his life, which most people are killed in the Inquisition. He's a Jewish, not a monk, a rabbi, sorry. But he ends up traveling to London with a couple of orphaned teenagers that come with him. The boy is supposed to be a scribe, but his sister ends up doing that. And that is just unheard of in the day and age for a woman to be educated and a scribe. So this was also brilliant. It goes through the plague in London and just so rich in history. And this is from different perspectives too. And this does alternate, but you get basically two timelines. You get the 1660s timeline, and then you get modern day London, where they have found the text that this scribe has written, transcribed for this rabbi, a cache of them in this home, and the man that owns the home called his old professor to come investigate them. And you wouldn't think a race to translate documents would be thrilling, but I found it. So anyway, there is also a full-length review of this if you want to hear more about it, and I will link that. January was a brilliant reading month, truly. It was so fabulous. In the Land of Armadillos by Helen Merrills Shankman. My battery went low, so I had to push the button. This I just loved so much. This is set during World War II, and sometimes I'm hesitant to pick up more books from that setting. Just I've read it so extensively, and you start to wonder, is there anything else to add to it? And I don't mean that, you know, in a crass way, but you just want a fresh perspective sometimes, and this was that. I just think this is such an important contribution to the World War II Holocaust story. This is set in a village in Poland on the border, and it is set before the final solution. So there are still Jews living somewhat freely in the area, but the Germans have occupied, and they're killing Jews quite often, just gunning them down and into mass burial pits that the Jews have had to dig for themselves. But there are still Jews living in the ghettos and employed by Germans and such. So this is a series of short stories loosely connected, all set in the same town. And the thing that I found interesting about this, and the reason why it's such a fresh perspective to the body of works around the Holocaust, is a lot of these are from the viewpoint of the Nazis, the regular average German occupying force, and just their thoughts and the way they processed it, and the apathy, you know, that age-old question, how could something like this happen? And this answers it in a way. You just see that apathy, and it's just war, and this is, you know, what happens in war. And you see both perspectives. You see, well, more than both. You see the three perspectives, really. Well, four, the Jewish one. I'm rambling, but you see stories where the people are just, I'm just doing my job. And, you know, I'm helping you out because I like you, but, you know, I'm just doing my job, and it doesn't really matter what happens to your people. And then you see the perspective of, you know, I absolutely hate Jews, and I'm going to make sure that every single one that I see gets turned in, and then how that view can change because of a little girl. And then you see the, you know, again, it's just this, I'm not saying it well, but this is a great book. I really got a lot from it. And the weird thing is, I haven't seen this around much, and I think it's due to poor marketing, because it really is a great book. But this is the hardcover edition in the Land of Armadillos, and then they released it in softcover and changed the name and design. So it's called They Were Like Family to Me in the softcover edition, and it's got little birds all over it. So yeah, I don't know why they did that. If it wasn't selling well under this name and they thought, you know, changing what would do, I don't know. But I would highly recommend this if you can get your hands on it. It's in the Land of Armadillos in hardcover, but you'd more likely see They Were Like Family to Me with birds on the cover by Helen Merrills Shankman. Excellent. And then I finally got around to Mouse by Art Spiegelman. And again, I think this adds such an amazing contribution to the Holocaust body of works, in that the author, this is a memoir of his father's life just prior to his mother and father, prior to World War II, and then going into the ghettos and then into the concentration camps. And that in itself is really neat format. It's a graphic novel to experience that story. But the brilliant thing for me about these was that he alternates the memoirs with his relationship with his dad in modern day time, and, you know, the things his dad's going through as an aging adult. And it's just really interesting to see the boy, you know, go through guilt because he has a normal life and normal, I don't know what the word is, teenage attitude. And even more interesting than that is the dad's attitude. Like, in this book, you have an old man that hates Jews, but then changes his attitude somewhat when he has to care for a little girl who is Jewish and hide her and grows to love her. And in this book, you have a man that has gone through the Holocaust as a Jew, comes through it, lives through it, and it doesn't change his prejudices. There's a scene where he is like straight up, wide open, racist with a black man. It's amazing. So it's just an interesting perspective on people are people. Definitely. And then I read Elie Wiesel. I read Day. This is his trilogy, like his most well-known. Night is what he is known for. Night is his memoir of he and his father going through the Holocaust camps. And it is, you know, a traditional, what you'd expect memoir if you've read much of the Holocaust. He's a profound author. And then Dawn, I would highly recommend Dawn. It is brutal. It's just so hard-hitting, but it is the militaristic attitude of Israelis when they're setting up Israel, you know, when the Palestine conflict was going on and Israel was trying to become a nation, and the militaristic attitude of a lot of the citizens at the time. It's a really perspective that I think a lot of us aren't aware of. And then Day didn't really hit me as hard. It's more of again, that survivor's guilt of, do I really deserve to live? So many people have died. So yes, great author, Elie Wiesel. And then this one I appreciated so much. This is Genesis by John B. Judas. Truman, the American Jews, and the Origins of the Arab-Israeli Conflict. So I was just trying so hard to understand the layout of Palestine and Israel and how that's all working, and this finally explained it to me. I got it figured out. So this is very dry academia, but that's fine. It was totally explaining to me what I needed to know. It starts out with kind of an overview, and you might just, you know, if you're interested, check it out and just read that first chapter or two to get the idea of what's going on, and that would be all you really needed to read. But it goes through right after, well, even during World War II, but when it was a territory, I'm not sure if the correct word, of England. And so they had responsibility, jurisdiction over it for a time, and the muddied waters with that, and then how it eventually, after the war, the U.S. was left holding that bag, and they muddied the waters even worse. And then basically Israel took the matter into their own hands and, you know, aggressively took over. But this really explained it well. And then the Obama years at the end, that explained some things to me about, you know, why Obama was so hated, and the Zionist movement, if, you know, you are not familiar with that. This really was a lesson in politics as well. So much of this conflict in the early days, nobody would make a decision because of politics, and not, you know, international politics, domestic politics, and just the political power that the Jewish community had in the States and in England, and wielded that power in elections to get what they wanted in Israel. I mean, elections in the States. It's just amazing to watch the political process at work and see all that going on. So this is academic, but if you truly are interested in knowing what that place looks like, it just totally confused me how there's a state within a state, but now I get it. So thank you, John B. Judas. And after I finished that, I went ahead and reread Jerusalem by Guy DeLisle, an excellent author. He is also a graphic novelist. And I read this earlier in the year, last year. I thought on What Camel Reads channel, and it kind of gave me an idea of the lay of the land, if you will, but it kind of left me just as confused as I was, just with a vague knowledge. But after reading this one and kind of having a good sense of what was going on, this just totally gelled it and made it make so much more sense. So this is, his wife works for Doctors Without Borders, and so he follows her and then makes cartoon journals of their times there, and just brilliant. So this was just a brilliant combination of reading. And then last up, I just have this random Scenes from Village Life by Amos Oz. Amos Oz is well known for Judas, that won, I think, maybe the Man Booker a couple years ago, which I didn't get to, but I did get to this. And this is another book of short stories that are loosely connected in just the one village. So that's a neat perspective with the World War II one that I read. And this one is written really well. So I'm excited to read Judas Oz. But this was interesting in that the stories, none of them were resolved. Like, there was clearly a lack of resolution at the end of each short story. And I thought that they would, like, tie them up at the very end, and they didn't. So it's very interesting, and I think he's trying to say something with that, and maybe I need to research it online and figure it out. But well written, and I'm very much looking forward to reading Amos Oz. And this one I think is modern times as well. So that's it for now, and I did hit 20 minutes. Thanks for watching, and I will be back soon.